Once upon a time there was a little, nice girl. She was sweet to everyone who only saw her. But she was the loveliest and dearest of all to her grandmother, who did not even know what to give her beloved granddaughter. Once she gave her a red velvet hat. And since this hat was very suitable for her, and she did not want to wear anything else, they began to call her Little Red Riding Hood. Once her mother asked to take a piece of cake and a bottle of wine to her grandmother. They say that she is both sick and weak, it will be good for her. She ordered my mother not to run away from the road, otherwise she would fall and break the bottle, and then grandmother would get nothing. And when she comes to her grandmother, so that she does not forget to say hello to her. Little Red Riding Hood obeyed, took the presents and set off. And my grandmother lived already behind the forest, half an hour walk from the village. And as soon as Little Red Riding Hood entered the forest, she met a wolf. The girl, however, did not know what kind of fierce beast it was, and was not in the least afraid of him. She greeted politely. The wolf also behaved very decently, so Little Red Riding Hood told the wolf that she was bringing gifts to her beloved grandmother. And while she was telling how to get to her grandmother's house, the wolf thought to himself how he could eat not only the old woman, but also a pretty girl. And then the wolf thought of showing Little Red Riding Hood a huge meadow with beautiful flowers. Little Red Riding Hood, as she looked at the many wonderful flowers, thought that it would be nice to bring grandmother a fresh bunch of flowers, because that would also please her. Yes, and ran away from the road to the side, and began to collect flowers. Slightly picking one flower, as the other beckons her, it is even better, and she will run after that. And so it went further and further into the depths of the forest. And the wolf ran straight to grandmother's house and knocked on the door. Grandma asked who was there. And the wolf replied in a thin voice that it was Little Red Riding Hood who brought the pie and wine. The old woman believed and ordered to press on the latch and enter. The wolf pressed the latch, the door flew open, and he ran to his grandmother's hut. He rushed to grandmother's bed and swallowed it at once. Then he put on his grandmother's dress and her cap on her head, went to bed and waited. Meanwhile, Little Red Riding Hood ran and ran after flowers, and when she collected as many of them as she could carry, then she again remembered about her grandmother and went to her house. She was very surprised that the door was wide open, and when she entered the room, she called out to her grandmother. There was no answer. The granddaughter came up to the bed and saw grandmother was lying, and she had pulled her cap on her very nose, and it seemed so strange. Little Red Riding Hood asked with bewilderment why grandmother had such big ears. And the wolf answered in a grandmother's voice to hear better. Then Little Red Riding Hood asked why grandmother had such big eyes. To better see you, the wolf answered. And the arms are so big that it is easier to grip. And when Little Red Riding Hood saw the wolf's mouth and only asked why grandmother had such a nasty big mouth, the wolf pounced on her, screaming, "So I could eat you." And how he jumped out from under the blanket and swallowed the poor girl. Having had enough in this way, the wolf again went to bed, fell asleep, and began to snore as much as he could. At that time a hunter was passing by the grandmother's house, heard snoring and wondered if something had happened to the old woman that she snored so. He entered the house, went to the bed and saw that the wolf was sleeping there. And he has been hunting this villain for a long time. He wanted to kill him with a gun, but it occurred to him that the wolf, perhaps, swallowed his grandmother and that she could still be saved. That is why he did not shoot, but opened his wolf's mouth wide, and saw a red cap flashed there. A girl jumped out of her mouth and said that her grandmother was still there. The hunter opened his wolf's mouth even wider, and the old grandmother somehow managed to get out behind the Red Riding Hood. They were delighted, began to hug and thank the hunter. They decided to teach a cunning wolf a lesson. They brought up large stones as soon as possible, stuffed them into the wolf's mouth and belly, and carried him out into the yard. And when the wolf woke up, he saw the hunter, and was about to escape, but could not bear the weight of the stones, and fell to the ground. This delighted all three, while the wolf got up and barely dragged its heavy belly into the dark forest. They never saw him again. This is how they taught the cunning wolf a lesson, and Little Red Riding Hood decided that she would never again disobey Mother's orders.
It was snowing outside. It got darker and darker. It was just before Christmas. In this cold season, a little beggar girl walked through the streets with her bare head and bare feet. Her legs were completely red from the cold. In her hands the girl carried a box. It was a little match seller. For the whole day she did not sell a single match, since no one paid attention to the girl. She could not return home, because that day she did not help out a penny. The girl had no choice but to wander the streets further. Finally the girl found a cozy place around the corner of the house. She sat down on the frozen ground. The girl felt even colder. Her hands were completely frozen, and her fingers ached from the cold. She couldn't take this pain anymore. The girl timidly took out one match. With trembling hands, she struck a match against the wall. The match flashed brightly, and began to burn with an even light flame, like a tiny candle. The poor girl shifted it from hand to hand to warm her fingers. She imagined herself sitting by a large fireplace in a beautiful room. This made the girl even warmer. But suddenly, the flame went out. The fireplace disappeared, and only a burnt match remained in his hand. The girl lit another match. To prevent the wind from blowing, the poor thing turned to face the wall. The girl looked at the match, and the wall suddenly disappeared. A large, elegant room appeared before her eyes. There were many different foods on a set table with a snow-white tablecloth. The girl wanted to take a piece of meat, but the match went out, and a cold, damp wall again stood in front of the poor thing. The girl lit another match. Now she was sitting in front of a luxurious Christmas tree. This tree was much taller and more elegant than those that the girl had ever seen. Thousands of candles burned on its green branches. The girl could not take her eyes off them. But suddenly the match went out. The lights began to go higher and higher, and soon turned into clear stars. The girl again struck a match against the wall, and when everything around was lit up, she saw how one of the stars rolled across the sky, leaving a long trail of fire behind it. Probably someone died, the girl thought. Her beloved grandmother said more than once that when an asterisk falls, someone's soul flies into heaven. And suddenly, her kind and affectionate grandmother appeared in front of the girl. She appeared for a short moment. And then the match burned out in the girl's hands. The image dear to her vanished. The girl hastily struck all the matches remaining in the pack, just to see her grandmother again. The matches flared up so blindingly that it became brighter than during the day. The grandmother appeared in front of the girl again. She had never seen her as beautiful as she is now. The girl dreamed that it would never end. Grandmother took her granddaughter by the hand, and together they flew high into the sky where there is no hunger, no cold, no fear. The little girl felt extraordinarily good. And just at that moment a star flew across the sky. On a frosty morning, around the corner of the house, they found a little girl lying under the wall. Her eyes were closed. A blush played on her cheeks. An affectionate smile lit up her face. There were a lot of burnt matches around the girl. No one had any idea what miracle she happened to see, and among what beauty they together with their grandmother, met this Christmas night.